morning, podcast Czech Taekwon-Do, in special location, Crete, Heraklion, Greece, summer, not now, but my guest is Mr. Nenad Seferagic, the president of Croatian Taekwondo Federation. Welcome.
Well, thank you for the invitation and thank you for a good pronunciation of my name. Perfect. Finally, somebody.
Finally, somebody. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we will speak. I would like to speak about the European Championship 2022. Mm-hmm. So, what you already did for this championship?
Well, we actually prepare everything which is basic, so the venue and hotels, of course. And the rest, it should be easy, as Porridge is a well-known touristic destination and well-known by the organization of big and smaller sport events. So we actually copy-pasting many other events that we are doing. I am involved personally, as my core business is sport event management, and my destination in 90% for all my events is Porridge, so it shouldn't be a big problem. The new thing that we actually brought into the ITF is a joint venture between Slovenian and Croatian ITF, but this was actually because of the situation with ITF in Croatia, which finally we somehow solved, but we are still working on it.
Mm-hmm. I remember that you already cooperated in previous European Championship, so it's following something.
Yeah, Master Durakovic and myself, we met in 1980. And since then we are friends. We are working together in several events. In the meantime, I actually traveled the world and wasn't so much involved in Taekwondo. But I'm back since 2008, since the previous Europeans in Porridge. We are together on the same track, and we do have experience in cooperating in Bled and Slovenske Konjice and the events that have been done before in Slovenia and Croatia as well.
What we can look for? What will be new surprise? If we can say.
Yeah, we had some really good ideas, and I'm still trying to find a solution to make it possible. I wouldn't like to talk about it because then it wouldn't be a surprise. But we want to do something different, special, especially starting with the opening ceremony, which unfortunately usually in our sport are not so glamorous or whatever. I don't want it to be glamorous, but I want it to be different, and this is what we're working on. And of course the treatment of coaches and people responsible for teams, we believe that they deserve more. So this is something that at this point we are trying to find how we can please them, and actually how we can say thank you because you brought the team. It's the coaches at the end that are bringing the teams and competitors. Yeah. This is probably the main two focuses where we're trying to find some changes and possibility to change.
Looks very interesting.
Yeah.
I hope everyone will enjoy. And what about measures, anti-COVID measures, current or what do you expect next year?
Well, it will sound strange, but at this point I'm happy because the numbers are rising up now.
Yeah.
Because then I expect that from December and after, then the numbers will be back to the normal level, and restrictions and not be so tough. Even that I have to admit that in Croatia we didn't have really tough restrictions, and especially not towards the sports sector and towards the touristic sector. And everything went well. That actually this season, for example, touristic season was one of the best ever. Comparing even to 2019, which was surprisingly super season, and afterwards we had the COVID situation, so you cannot count. And this year, actually, we expected that we are going to be like maybe 70% comparing to 2019, but we actually went to 102 or 130%, something like this. Is much, much bigger. So I believe this is not going to be a trouble. Anyhow, if then we are ready with all the system, all the health system, and of course everybody else who are involved in the process of setting up the measures and control the situation.
Sounds great. We will be happy it will be like that because the measures are changing in a lot of countries, and we already spoke with the Greek president about the different measures in different countries. So we hope that next year will be much better and the number of competitors will be nice. As we spoke before, you mentioned and we mentioned together that this European Championship in 2008, I think it was a wonderful event because everyone enjoyed the old town of Porridge, so it's a very beautiful city. And there was everything close together. How it will be done next year?
Yeah, the Porridge 2008 was fantastic because you had a venue just next to the hotel. And it was like 1 minute walking from the hotel to the venue. Now it's a little bit different, but not so much because a new venue, a big venue, was built just to the outskirts of the old city, which is maybe 5 minutes walking to the old city, and 4 minutes driving by bus from the hotel to the venue and back. So it's not going to be a big deal regarding the transportation and time wasting, because transportation is actually a time wasting part of the event, and we can easily go and run to this. So very approachable venue, and no traffic jams because first of all, Porridge, totally small city, but beautiful. And after that, we are in March, so still not touristic season. And as I said, it's on the outskirts. We don't have to run into the city center with buses and with everything. And it's, I may say, a perfect setup.
Mm-hmm. And for me, it will be a new experience at the end of March. What are temperatures? What we can expect, probably?
Well, you must know that over there, in this part of Croatia, if the temperature is 5 degrees in the winter, we already all cold. So I expect spring temperature, which is around 19, 21. Something like what we are having now in Greece, in this last couple of days.
Yeah, it will be nice for competition because when it's hot outside, it's
not
so comfortable. And we can also speak about this championship because you are also involved in organizing committee. How are you satisfied with this championship?
I'm always satisfied because I see an effort what people actually had to do, or what they have to do during the preparation, especially now in these totally crazy times, and when we were uncertain until the last minute, until the last second, actually, what is going to happen. The good response for the national teams, or NGBs, very good and surprisingly good, with a number of competitors as well. So I must say, yes, I'm happy. Even that my point of view, as I see the possible future development, is a little bit different because I think we are just now at the edge of being something different and not really a real sport with a high quality. So we might keep this format for like entertaining and being together, friendship, because this is something that Taekwondo promotes. But we do have to start thinking about a real sport and maybe make this step forward and offer to the people that actually want to be involved in a sport as a competitive thing, that we have to offer them these possibilities as well. We have some plans. We are going to propose these plans on the next Congress, and of course in the meantime discuss with all the bodies and see what we can do and what we have to do. Not to enter into too many risks, because with this size of competition we are always facing a big risk. So therefore, one more time, going back to the Crete and Greek organizers, yeah, very good job done and a very high risk taken because of all of us.
Do you see some areas what can be improved in organizing of events such as this?
There's always a lot of space. Yeah, we have to admit that we are still very, very amateur organization, and this is first step that we actually have to go through and try to make it be more professional. Of course, I know it's always about money, and it's not easy to find money, but I think we are a very good platform to create a marketing around what we do. So, for example, your approach in the Czech Federation is fantastic with podcasts, with social networking and everything you're doing. This is something that we have to implement in our approach to the public as well. I'm doing this from behalf of the European Federation, but always trying to be a little bit different. So no, for example, we are not going to do podcasts. Why? Because you are doing fantastic podcasts, so we don't have to copy paste. We will try to approach differently. We started a couple of years ago with photo competitions and things like this, and it was a big success. When you see the numbers, and now when I show these numbers to our partners, they said nice, because they became visible, and for them this is important. So this is how actually you build. It's not only event itself, but everything what goes through your activities. And this is another space where we can emphasize our work, which is at this point, as you, if you try to see what we're doing, is one event per year. And for a serious organization, this is not good. So what we have to do is more events, more official events, and then actually have more space in media, more content created for the social networks, and then, of course, more people interested in following us, and that's how you create a marketing platform.
I agree that this is a big area. What we have to, not need, we have to improve, because when you are somewhere in media, you are. Because when you are not, you are not. So we need also more events, which will be marketed and so on. We need also market these events after the event, because it's not about 1 week of stay at the championship. We have to push some information later, results, some statistic interesting, and so on. So I wish you, and we can wish all together that we have to improve this area.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of people willing to spend energy and knowledge and work, so we just have to give them more space, especially young people. I think they are much better off. I'm not too old, but the young people, they are actually much closer, especially when we talk about the social networking and new media and new platforms. We need to give them space, or at least we need to find a way to put them in a chain that will actually work all together. And this is something, you see the numbers, which when you post your photos, and then you can actually see how it's increasing, not only likes, but how many people reached and viewed. They reach, they share it. And this is also important thing, that we need to share everything between us, between different But more
countries.
We have to share, more we produce, we will actually have more to share. And then it's not actually something that demands a lot of energy. Years ago I proposed, and it was very well accepted, and we will proceed with the A-class tournament project, which is actually only implementing the standards to the tournament, by actually helping as well the organizer of the tournament, because when you bring something to the A-class, to something that means that the competitors will come, and extra competitors will come. And we actually didn't do a lot. We just created a common name and common platform. And this is what I'm saying. Then you actually involved other people and other organizers to take part in what you're doing. It's actually for free. And we have a great possibility to develop. It doesn't have to be a class system, maybe a qualification system for the European, whatever. There is a lot of space in a sport. I am involved in different sports as a manager of sport events, and I see how they produce activities and events and everything. It's actually copy-paste.
Of course.
Very easy.
And as you mentioned, the A-class, I received several questions about Czech Open, and that was, it will be also A-class. I said, why not? Because we have this standard, and it's about standard. And maybe this idea about the competition, because it can be difficult for EITF to organize much more events, but I think that we have to share in advance time about all events, seminars, some courses, and also competition, because when I see some competition in maybe some reachable distance, it's very often late after the competition, or not in advance time. Maybe it's 2 weeks before this competition. So we have to create maybe some small platform, some shared schedule calendar, and put the information. Okay, there will be competition. You should put for which competitors it's designed, and also some info pack and all so on.
Yeah. This is the main idea actually. Put everything under the same umbrella and under the same standards, because we did have a lot of competition, but all different standards, and the umpiring was organized differently. Like parents were umpiring, so we don't want this. I mean, it's okay if somebody wants to do it. But we want to offer something that is a competition, that is a sports system, and you know how it works. There must be umpires, there must be organization, there must be protocols, there must be everything. But it's not hard, because we all know how to do this. And it's for the organizer, it's hard financially. But if you bring them more competitors, because you make them important as a tournament, then it's easy for them as well. And then you have actually 5, 6, 7 events every year, plus educational seminars and things that are actually technical parts. And we have the organization that is fluent, that is working, and that is learning, actually, because we have to become a learning organization as well.
Before you noted about the situation in Croatia, about Taekwondo, how it runs now, because I heard that you have some problems. And how is it going now?
So actually we have now a good situation, because in 1992, when the Croatian Olympic Committee was founded, after the split of Yugoslavia, we became an independent country, and we found the Olympic Committee, and since then ITF Taekwondo in Croatia doesn't exist officially. We were under the umbrella of WT organization, but we never had any recognition, any financing, anything that actually could lead us to develop. So we started to fight and started to ask for the recognition. By recognition, I mean that there is a famous list of the recognized sport in Croatia produced by Olympic Committee. So once you enter to this list, then you have a right to have your own federation, your own national team, and all the sports rights. So this is the first step. And we managed to do this in February this year, finally, after Tony Nobilo left us as a chief in 2013. We started to fight against with laws and with everything, trying to find a way, putting a lot of pressure, and suddenly, even unexpectedly, because I was expecting more and more negotiation, in February this year we obtained this letter of recognition, and finally ITF is in the list of sports under the name of traditional ITF Taekwondo. Immediately in March we founded our national organization, national governing body, and now there is a next step, and next step is becoming a member of the Olympic Committee. Even we are non-Olympic sport, but Olympic Committee in Croatia gathers everybody. Once we do this, and now we are in the process, then we have a right to obtain financial support, and it's not only about the finance, it's about the right to use venues for training, for clubs, for everybody. So once you recognize, it's not only that you will get money, you will have some rights, which are okay. For example, we had world champions and European champions, and really good competitors, but nobody never recognized their work and their success, because Taekwondo, ITF, actually wasn't a sport, it was a folk event or whatever. So this is what we do now, and we are very happy, because after 30 years of being in the dark, now we are finally on the light. That's why the event in Croatia next year, European Championships, for us, it's extremely important, because this is actually something that will bring us new life and new light on everything that we do. Not easy, but I think we have to be persistent, indomitable spirit. So you go forward, you do, and it is 30 years, but it's just maybe 1/3 of somebody's life. So
maybe it's one long step for a very, very long future.
This is it. We have to think
necessary to do it.
You don't have to think about yourself. You think about the others who are coming, and I would like them not to have the problems that we had actually. And now I think we are on the good way. We do have some problems, of course, in this process, because there are always some people they want to stop you because of whatever reason. But all the legal stuff and all the documents and everything is in our favor. So maybe we will have to wait 1 more year or 2, but sooner or later it will happen that we will go in. The problem will be in the future, we already see the problem because of the international setup of Taekwondo. We are the ITF Taekwondo, but we use the same name as WT. Once we manage to change the name, or at least give some prefix or whatever, then we will be treated as 2 different sports, and we will open some doors. I always put an example: tennis, table tennis, golf, mini golf. They're not same organization. They're totally, even if the sport is almost the same, or the name at least is the same. But it brings you the right to have your own space and your own organization and everything, like what I said before. So in Croatia now we are traditional ITF Taekwondo Federation, maybe original or whatever. So it is maybe a future that for many countries, if we manage to change some things within ourselves as well, not only outside.
I wish you good luck.
Thank you.
This. And Nenad, I would like to thank you for this very nice interview.
Thank
and
you.
Wish you good luck with Porridge European Championship, and hope everybody will join it in a beautiful city such as Porridge.
I am really looking forward to this event. I am really looking forward to see your team over there. And I must say one more time, I absolutely admire your work and work within the federation and what you do around the federation. I think you must be a role model to many, many other countries and organizations on how to organize and how to produce and how to promote what we are doing, because we are doing something wonderful. And
Thank
this
you.
is Taekwondo. Thank you. Thank you.